So I've done a thing where I went on Goodreads and I decided that I wanted to read some really weird shit. And I found a list of most bizarre mangas ever written, and I said, why not? And today we're gonna find out if that was a brilliant idea or it was a really bad idea. And welcome back to my channel. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Eva here, and today, as I just mentioned in the intro, well before the intro, I am gonna wrap up 10 mangas that I read that I found on a list on Goodreads of the most bizarre mangas ever written. Now, Goodreads is saying that, am I saying they're most bizarre mangas ever written? I've not read enough to judge, so I don't know how accurate that list was on Goodreads. I'm gonna go through from the least bizarre to the most bizarre manga that I've read. They are rated not regarding my enjoyment for that, by how much disturbing or really absurd I found these, if it makes sense. So that's how I'm gonna rate these. And again, a lot of the mangas in that list I was interested in, some more than the one I ended up picking. The problem was that they are not translated in English, or I couldn't find a copy that was available to me. So of that long list, it was a miracle I came out down with 10. But I so much enjoyed this reading challenge that I put up myself, and it was a really quick, easy one as well. So without further ado, from the least to the most disturbing, I'm gonna wrap up for you a bunch of weird as shit mangas. Disclaimer, this is my list. I guess someone might find these disturbing in a different order, and that's fine. So my plan was to read in 10. This list actually goes from 9 to 1, and I will leave an honorable mention at the end, and you'll find out at the end why I didn't include it. And without further ado, let's get around to the wrap up. So, 9th place, Helsing, by Kohata Mirano. This very is an anime on Netflix, which I watched just right after reading this, and it's exactly the same. So we'll continue on with the anime, but not with the manga. The synopsis of this is that you got this girl, her father gets murdered by his brother, who wants to acquire the family company. He is about to kill off her as well when she finds refuge in a dungeon where she finds a corpse, and seconds before she's about to get murdered by the uncle, this corpse comes back to life and saves her. And turns out that this corpse is a really powerful vampire who's been hired by his father and is now protecting her, and they set up basically to continue the family business, which is mostly to capture and bring to justice or an early grave, well, you can call it an early grave, monsters that terrorize humans. Now, I'll show you some of the art. Now, is this bizarre and disturbing? Yes. I would say though, and this is why it's not 9th place, is that a lot of these books in this challenge were mostly horror, which is definitely the case of this. This is bizarre because of this vampire. So we got Alucard, and Alucard is really peculiar character, I give you that. This is kind of bizarre. So even the 9th place, it is enough bizarre to say, you know, yes, there is, I understand why it's on the list. However, there is way more horror and brutal and bloody than bizarre, if it makes sense. So it is a really horror manga on vampires with a lot of brutality in it, which I really enjoyed. I ended up giving though 3.75 stars to this. Not the best thing ever. I just think, well, first of all, it's just the first volume, so to really digest and appreciate a manga, you definitely need to give more than one volume a chance. But when I knew there was an anime, I just preferred to digest this in an anime format, which is really weird for me. I don't know, it's not really easy to find volumes, and mangas are pretty expensive, so I don't know, the story didn't capture me enough to justify me buying the mangas when I can just watch the anime. I love vampires though. I really enjoy Alucard. It's just that I've read so many and watched so many that it just felt new just to a certain degree. I also really, for example, love Castlevania on the anime on Netflix, and so I just had watched that, and then I kept comparing these. And despite Alucard is definitely a unique character, I don't know, it didn't feel so new. Again, it felt more horror. It's bizarre in the way it's violent and bloody, if you wanna, but it's not just bizarre for itself. It's just the way they do this character and the violence, the way it's portrayed. It's a bit weird. I enjoyed it as just someone who, you know, watched Blade Trinity and all of that as a kid, then watching a lot of tons of horror with vampires and supernatural creature. This was just not that out there, if it makes sense. At number 8, we have Godchild, and this is by Kaori Yuki. This is a subsequent series to another manga called Angel Sanctuary. I didn't know until I picked this up, and I've not read the first one, the first series, I mean. Now, this is a story about this young gentleman, and he has recently lost most of his family apart from his little sister, and he is an expert of poison. And in this volume, he goes about resolving mysteries, like we got serial killers, people committing atrocious crimes, and he just kind of acts as a detective, although he's not really a detective. He's more like a paranormal expert that gets involved in this stuff. This has a really gothic vibe, which I really love. So I found this just a bit more disturbing than, for example, the previous one, because in this we tackle some aspects of humanity that are quite dark, and the way the plot and these mysteries are resolved, they go in places that are definitely bizarre. It's less out there though. It's not one that you'd see, what if I'm reading, what is this? No, it's more subtle, if you want. So for many, I guess this would have taken 9th place instead of Helsing, but for me, because of the way the characters act, some of the characters act in these, especially the bad guys, they were quite peculiar and they got my attention. It's just that kind of gothic, dark, and yet with this, you know, fascinating boy in it. It's just my cup of tea, I guess. I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4.25 stars, and I will be continuing the series for sure. It's just the right atmosphere. It just puts you in that atmosphere that you get with some anime, or for me, for example, from some video games, which I really enjoyed. So yeah. 7, we have Berserk by Kentaro Miura. Now listen, because I understand that for many people this would be first place, but this is another instance where I believe bizarre and horror and brutal mix up. So because again, I am quite used to read stuff like this and digest stuff like this, for me it wasn't as bizarre as other stuff I read in the rest of this challenge. So this is the story of this young man. He has a mechanical arm. We don't know why in this volume. He's just traveling to a city where there is a really dark lord ruling, and he gets in town, he gets in trouble immediately, and turns out that he's after the dark lord. Now, this is a fantasy horror manga. Love the art. Now listen, the art is just the best. It is a quite old series, but I love the art so much, and also this story is exactly what I love, and I gave this 5 stars. So despite me, you know, not putting this high up in the list, it's one of the most enjoyable that I read in this challenge. So that you'll see that I really enjoy doing this challenge, and this one called me from page 1. I was like, ooh, and then we keep going, and it gets better and better. Now this is just volume 1, so I can only imagine what to expect from the rest. I am planning actually to buy the deluxe edition, so probably will sell this and get the deluxe editions sooner than later, hopefully. And I love how dark and fucked up this is, but again, it's not as bizarre. It's weird, but in a way that I'm familiar with, if it makes sense. It's just a top-notch level when it comes down to brutality violence and be bloody, and having a really main character that's it's really grim dark, if you want. So loved it, 5 stars. But again, it's like the top ranking of a familiar genre, so that's why I probably didn't find it as bizarre as other stuff. Said that, it's not for everybody, it's for grown-up only, and it's weird. It's really weird as fuck. So keeping that in mind, because my idea of bizarre is kind of, I've read really weird stuff in my life, so that's why probably I've got such higher standards. But 7th place for now. Then I've got Doll by Mitsuraku Mihara, and ultra rare cover. I agree, it was really hard to find this. I'm gonna show some of the art. Love the art as well. This is a collection of short stories, so every issue you got different characters, but each story deals with humans that are introduced in a way or the other to these dolls. It looks like humans, and they have different roles in the character's life. And this is not too violent. It definitely has some sexual innuendos throughout, as you can imagine, some dolls for what they are used. It's not too explicit though. Again, it's one of the same vibes of Godchild, where I found more disturbing the aspects of humanity and the topics and the dark human's nature that these kind of delves into, more than, it's less brutal, less violent. It's just completely different than Berserk or Helsing. We're dealing with something totally different. I found this more bizarre for where we go, because I'm more used to horror with heads flying, if you want, than this kind of story, if it makes sense. And I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to continue on, but these one are really, really hard to find, so wish me luck. Then I've got Smashed by Junji Ito. This is a short story collection by Ito, who is a really popular, famous Japanese horror manga creator. I also own his novels, and some of them were in the list, not all of them, but majority of them were. But I decided to go with the short stories, and I'll show you some of the art for what I can. Again, each story is really different from one from the other, and they're all really horror and really weird, 100% weird. This is mostly, there is a lot of body horror in this, and there is also like a supernatural element and an element of what the hell am I just reading and watching. That's definitely bizarre. So here I would definitely say yes, 100% this is bizarre. I gave this 4.25 stars. There were just a couple of stories that I didn't like so much as the others, and I think Ito is mine, man. I'd love to have a chat with this man, like what's going on in there, because I'm sure it's fucked up, and I'm not sure it's in a good way or a bad way, but thank you for this, if it makes sense. So I absolutely love his style. It does get to a point where though his drawings are always the same, so the characters look pretty much similar from a story to the other. I also think it gets sometimes lost on the endings. Like, he has got such a strong start, strong middle, and then the story ends and then like so that's why. But overall, it's a genius. Like, I'm not taking away, please don't think I'm taking away anything from this author. I will read, buy everything he puts out. Absolutely, I'm in love with this stuff. I just need to recognize also that there are some aspects lacking, on my opinion, which is particularly the ending of some of his short stories. And at the 4th place, I've got Shiver by Junji Ito, another collection of short stories. First of all, can we appreciate these covers? Are just yes. And I showed you already the art. This collection of stories I've enjoyed a tiny bit more, meaning that I enjoyed all the stories in that, apart from a story about Tommy that I had already read, his length, novel about Tommy. So that one, I don't know why it was in there, because it's exactly the same as in Tommy. So apart from that, and maybe the first story here again, which I enjoyed but not too much, I absolutely loved this, 4.75 stars. And the same applies, just that these compared to these, I think was just the stories were better, the stories were even more interesting, and that was already a really high standard. So I just overall I chose fifth and fourth place, sorry, just for enjoyment at this point. Really fucked up, really bizarre. His stuff are horror, which yes, again, I read a lot of horror, but his stuff, because probably is body horror, which is kind of a new genre for me, that's why maybe it sounds so bizarre and new. But again, I'm experiencing with him body horror for the first time in a visual format like this, loving it. It's just, that's what probably I found it more bizarre than normal horror, I guess. The ideas that he come with, it's genius. This man, let's have tea. Junji, Mr. Ito, just let's have a cup of tea. You know, let's discuss this. And number 3, we have the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service by Eiji Otsuka and Hozui Yamazaki. This is a bind-up edition of volume 1, 2, and 3, and I love these bind-up editions, but I'm struggling to find the second one, so if you know where I can find that, please, the bind-up, because I couldn't find the third and fourth one, couldn't find the second one for the life of me. Let me show some of the stuff in here. Love the art. Now, this is one of my new favorites with Berserk. I love this so much, gave it 5 stars. This is about this bunch of students of college. They are really broken, and they, though, decide to put together a delivery corps service because they all have some kind of powers related to corpses. What they do exactly is find the bodies and then deliver the bodies to wherever the bodies, the dead, wants to go. There are some violent scenes in these. There are definitely some brutal moments. However, it's more horror in the sense of the human nature aspects and, you know, dark sides that come up. And I found extremely bizarre these. I believe, you know, these with the next ones that I'm going to mention, they can kind of be on the same, they could all be considered really bizarre. So, you know, there's not much difference between how bizarre this is and the first one in the list. And I loved it. The concepts that these authors came up with, they are just bloody genius, I believe. And I was not only, what am I reading, but I was also like, I wish I had thought about that. This is such a cool idea, if it makes sense. So absolutely love this. This is one of my favorite now, and I'm so grateful for, you know, this reading challenge. And then, you know, I just, in the spur of the moment, I decided to do this reading challenge. I was just perusing Goodreads for a totally different reason, and then I came up with this idea, and I'm so grateful because I enjoyed all of the things I read. It's amazing, and that may say something about me and how, you know, some of my favorite reads comes from horror or, you know, the most bizarre and fucked up things ever written. But I always find gems. I always find things I love, and I'm so grateful for this. I think, again, this is bizarre for the concept, and also because it's not like, you know, we're not dealing with zombies or anything of the sort. It's just about dead bodies and what it means to be dead. And also, you know, our human nature is dark. There are really dark, fucked up aspects of human nature, bizarre aspects, and this explores those. So that's why I found it so brilliant and so bizarre at the same time. And at number 2, we have The Flowers of Evil by Shuzo Oshimi. Now, this is the complete 3 free manga. So again, there are different volumes of these, so it's not a standalone. Please, I mean, it's
a few moments later.
So it's not a standalone in the per se, but it's a collection, a bind up of 3 volumes, and this is probably the only one that's not horror that I've read that I would not consider also horror. This is the story of this boy who's really shy. One day he goes to school and his crush end up leaving behind her gym bag, and he decides to take that home. Unfortunately, though, he's seen by this other really creepy outcast girl in the class who sees him, again, as I said, and she decides to blackmail him. And as a follow-up to that, you see the weirdest, most fucked up love triangle you could ever imagine. Now, when you read this, it's clear from the author footnotes and, you know, the chapters at the end that he is putting a lot of biographical elements in it. And this was weird. So I rated these 3 stars because there were some elements of this that really disturbed me in not a good way. Like, this guy was clearly going through something. He is constantly called by this other girl a pervert, and this book is all about him being a pervert and basically come to accept it and come to live with it and be okay with it. I think that's what I got away from it, and that's why I'm a bit like, I love the art. I'm going to show you the art, and I have to say, this is impossible to put down. Like, I was reading and I couldn't stop reading, and I was like, I'm not even particularly enjoying this. Why do I keep reading it? So I think the author somehow, as a young teen living in this town in the middle of nowhere, had a lot of thoughts that he thought other people would find extremely disturbing, and he decided to create a manga story around those thoughts and create characters, and some of these characters are there to justify, validate his thoughts, and to tell him that's okay to have these thoughts, and the important thing at the end is how you act, which it's also why I gave it 3 stars and no less, because at the same time I appreciate that there is a distinction between how you think and how you act, and we all have, especially as a teenager, sexual thoughts is pretty normal. So I think he was really repressed as a kid, and he's now trying with this. That's my meaning. That's why I took away to it, to make it okay, and to kind of go back and say I should have taken things more lightly, which is okay on one side, because having thoughts and feelings for somebody else, and even if it's in a sexual manner, it's pretty normal during teenagehood. It's again the way you act upon them that makes the difference. But one thing that he does at one point is that, sorry for the spoiler, so if you want to hear this, just skip ahead, but until I keep this on. But basically at one point, this girl that he stole the gym clothes from, she says, oh, even if you're a pervert, even if you did that, I'm okay, because I knew you did it because you care about me. And that I didn't like. That it was like, well, there is again the border between just thoughts and actions should never become blurred, if it makes sense, not even the manga, because other people might read these and kind of say, oh, well, that's okay, I did that, which is not. So again, sometimes it justified actions, the way he did this justifies, or it looked like he was justifying actions that to me are not justifiable. So he crossed the lines in that sense. So again, plus the characters, this bloody girl, I cannot freaking stand her. It's just, I don't like this love triangle. I don't like where this probably is going, and again, I'm fascinated by it. So but the dynamics, the way this is written, and the topic is so freaking bizarre. Like, I've never read something like this. I was horrified at some points, and I was reading like almost a love story, and you are horrified. So I found this extremely bizarre, and I might even continue with the series just because I don't know where this is going. I don't know how this is gonna end up, and I've got so many issues against this, but at the same time I'm fascinated. I cannot deny I'm fascinated. So I disliked it, and yet I found it fascinating. But overall, I do not agree with the majority of things that these characters do, and I hated the majority of the characters. It just, the author has skills there, I guess, in keeping it interesting enough for me to actually want to continue on. The number 1, which, to be fair, this could be number 1. It's just, they're pretty much the same as the bizarre goes. I've got Magical Girl Apocalypse by Kentaro Sato. Now, this little small manga that looks like nothing, looks like, oh yeah, it's just horror. It's the most fucked up horror I've ever read. It's so bizarre and absurd that it was almost funny, but it's really brutal. So I'm going to show you some of the art. So again, this concentrates a lot of things that you might not necessarily appreciate in a manga. For example, I think, girls are definitely seen as sexual objects with like big boobs and not necessarily the smartest ones in the bunch. But at the same time, so freaking entertaining and interesting. So we got this boy, one day he goes to school, and then this really weird girl appears in the garden, and she starts killing off everybody. indiscriminately and without any reason. She only says one word over and over again, and she is really hard to kill, and she creates so much mayhem that then spreads. And the way violence is done in this, and it's just bizarre. It's just bizarre. Again, I've read horror and I'm familiar with fantasy horror. This is an apocalypse journey with some magic element, but they don't look like magic. They look, it's just completely fucked up, like sci-fi probably. I would definitely say this is probably a sci-fi horror. I need to see how this develops. Definitely continue on with this. Loved it. So bloody entertaining. And I was like, definitely, I was on the train and I was like, what is this? And like, I love it. And the violence, like Berserk and these are the most violent mangas I've ever seen. Period. Helsing also there, but not. It's a whole new level of horror and blood and brutality, which I love. I gave this 4 stars just because I think it's the beginning, but it ended up on a cliffhanger and was like, I need to know. I bought immediately the next 2 volumes in the series. Just, I don't know what this is, but I love it. And the fact that I don't know what this is, it's the reason why it's on the number 1 list today. It's just, what the fuck is this? Like, how bizarre is this? I'm curious. But said that all I've read so far, all of them were bizarre in some way or the other. I was just not sure what they meant by bizarre, and I think now I kind of realize what they meant, but I'm curious and open to further suggestions. Please leave them down in the comments below, because I clearly love the genre. So, and the honorable mention is Hell Ladies. So this was meant to be in the list, and I bought this and I was prepared to reading these and just, you know, include these in the list. But turns out that this is just a collection of illustrations by Junko Mizuno between 1998 and 2001. So I'm gonna show you some of the art, and I'm gonna make sure that you know that these are gonna be explicit content. Okay, maybe this is I cannot show you anything of this. It's just so sexual content. Okay, I'm gonna show you this. It's not the best. If there are children around, just don't let them look. This is one of the mildest. Okay, all of these ladies in here, they got some blood, but also they got their boobs out. And when you're like, it's just the boobs out. Their art is the best. And when I opened this book, and it's plastic, and it's just look like, you know, books that I used to have like in elementary school, flashing plastic, smelling divine. I love this. I'm in love with this. The illustrations are amazing. Very bizarre. Extremely bizarre, with an honorable mention, even more than one. They all are bizarre, but there is absolutely no story. They're just a bunch of naked ladies, half zombies, really weird. Like, they got thing with, you know, it's just a mix of babies and ladies. They are babies, and they're, you know, out of, I don't even know how to describe this. It's that good and yet that bizarre. So just the cover, you know, just when I opened this, I was like, oh, this is gonna be weird. But because it's not a story, I didn't want to include in here. But I would suggest this 100%. A book to display and, you know, open with caution. But it's so pretty. Her illustrations are just the best thing in the world. Like, they are honestly so pretty. Oh yeah, here's another thing I meant. Let me show just these pages. You see, there are a lot of these in it. And the last thing I want to say about this is that in the middle there is like just some really short text that she basically writes to describe some of these ladies. And I believe there is so much more that it comes out of the page a little bit, but there's so much more behind it, because all the men are zombies depicted in these. And I think, I don't know, I'd be curious to know the story of this author, and I'll be checking more about her, because her art is the best. Give it 4.5 stars, just because I was waiting for, you know, some text I would have loved even more. But this is gonna be displayed on my bookshelves, and just, I'm in love with it. I'm in love with all these books. I was so lucky to get these. challenge, and I'm looking forward to do something similar in the future, like along those lines. I loved reading all these mangas. I had such a nice, stunning experience. Leave your recommendation down below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Ciao!